safety, our retention issues, and also some of the things going on with Georgia Grown and what was going to be impacted. That's in that supplemental booklet for the 20. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you want to review that, or we can certainly after the meeting or before we get to kind of final discussions, if any of you have any specific drill down questions to those, I'd love to address them.
We'll probably just ask the questions as we go along. We seem to
Very good, yes, ma'am. But your instruction today is for the, I think, primary analysis of 21. So I'll call your attention.
Before we get started, I'd like to ask. I'm sorry, Matt Jackson, to have a prayer for us, please.
Let's bow our heads. Father, in the name of Jesus, as we come before you, we ask for your wisdom, your guidance to lead us as we do the business of the state of Georgia, Lord. We know that you're well able, so we depend on you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And
Okay. Madam Chair, as we start on 21, I ask you to refer to the book, and then on pages 1 and 2, you'll see two sheets that we provided to you last week. The second, page 2 is your tracking sheet, but page 1 is a summary that we've put together with analysis that has the corresponding number in the original budget. It's over to the left. And so we thought it kind of maybe be easier to put it on one sheet for you so you can see where we are. I'd like to first talk about the numbers that are in black, because those are the additions. If you see the additions, and remember we have today, what we're going to be speaking to today is, while we have a number of attached agencies to us that show up in the budget, the big budget document, they show up attached to us. There are only 3 program areas of the Department of Agriculture that we're considering today, and that's Consumer Protection, Department of Administration, and Marketing and Promotion. So those 3 budget areas are outlined for you on this table. If you'll see, there's 402,000, 17,000, and 42,000. Those are the additions for the employees that we have that are under $40,000 a year, and the proposed $1,000 raise. There's a couple of additional facts I'd like to add to our previous discussion just so that we understand what these numbers mean. Our numbers that we reported to you last week are accurate. I knew that we wouldn't have told you if they were not, but I'm glad some other folks checked, and that's good. But even we have 337 employees. If you'll flip over to page 3, you'll see a pie chart that is an analysis of our 525 employees, and you'll see the light green and the orange are those who would qualify for that raise. That's 337 of our 525 make below 40,000. Okay. We're still only at $970 a piece gross. So if from a gross standpoint, I think we're about $18,000 short just to match the statement of $1,000 per employee. What's important to note, though, is $1,000. When I say $1,000 gross, that is not, from a budgeting standpoint, $1,000 per employee to add to their W-2. Because we normally would think, if I'm going to give you a $1,000 raise, I think of that in terms of, I'm going to give you a $1,000 raise, therefore your W-2 next year would reflect $1,000. And we all know that those type raises are not net, because you have the employees' portion of Social Security, the employees' portion of federal and state income taxes. So it's never, none of us ever get a net. But what's important here when I say a gross cost, when we figure from a budgeting standpoint to the number on benefits and the additional add-ons for a raise, the figure we always use is 1.62. And so, it's just important to note that either we don't have enough money to do the net, or we would have to go back within our other operations and consume resources to meet that based upon what we communicate to our employees. And so it's that's just I wanted to point that out. I don't know if I exactly said that in that much detail last week, but I know all of you are aware of how payroll works, but those are the percentages that in the past we've had to operate off of, because we had a bulk number for merit increases. If I want to give someone a merit increase of $1,000, $1,500, well, there are far more additional costs that we also have to budget for in order to make things balance. So those are the figures that are in the black. And we can drill down that into those if you'd like to. Let me turn to.
I'm sure
Yes, ma'am.
thank you, but I'm sure that Ms. Howell will be checking all that.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Bonner had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Commissioner Black, regarding those $1,000 pay increases. Is it your understanding that those raises are simply across the board for those that make under $40,000, or are they based on any sort of merit?
No, sir. My understanding is they're across the board.
So regardless of how well that employee performs, the recommendation is to give them a raise.
That was my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. If I turn to the if you will, the sadder numbers, Madam Chair, are the red ones, and there are a number of them here. And we've tried to give you an adequate explanation of them. I'm not going to read all that, but I just point the reduction in positions are, of course, the larger numbers. In consumer protection, that's 800,000. In administration, that's 93. And then we have two numbers in positions and program areas that are big in marketing. And one of those is the 472 number, and then the 920 number. I'd like to, from a standpoint of, that's where you get into what I said last time, of that we'll have a gap. The gap's going to grow because of how we do our job and how frequently we do our job. We're still going to have professionals on the ground every day, but if we have fewer, then their productivity will be less, and we will have fewer inspections. You ask us, the members of this committee and the chair have asked us to, take a look at what it would, what are some of those bare essentials that would be our recommendation to take a look at. I would ask you to turn to page 4. And page 4, it has a title of reinstatement that I'd like to ask you to consider. Those, again, don't have to read each one of them, but they're broken out by program area. And then that net cost would be $1.252 million. These steps simply restore under our current structure. If we want to discuss, which I think is a great challenge for the state, it's a great challenge for our agency, but I think it's an enormous challenge across much of the government, is that strategically, and I love thinking strategically. I hope I was found thinking strategically. the day we got here, and I hope the day I leave, we'll be thinking about what's next. How do we go? How do we plan? It's not just about just, pushing the clutch in and coasting, but strategically, what do we have to do to meet the needs of the future of the state? And Madam Chair, I'd call your attention to page 5, and we had some, you asked us to do some analysis of what we thought some additional strategic investment would be to get us somewhere toward a discussion of how could we be competitive in this very competitive economy. And you'd see that would be another addition of $780,000. I would tell you that is we've tried to be we're going to be conservative in our estimates. That's real conservative. I think we're going to be expected to do more in the future. If I could, Madam Chair, one of the things too, I think might be a good thing to look, talking about what those demands are. Would it be okay if I just showed you one thing in food safety back in the 20 document? Because some of the information that you requested, and I think the one that is, I think most stark is, and forgive me, we did not put a number on these pages, but it's about 2/3 of the way back. It's called Retail Food Inspection Statistics, and it is it's right in front of the marketing section, right in front of the actually it's right in front of the marketing graph. And let me see if I can pull these numbers together for you and make some sense. We've outlined years 2010 through 2019 just for Dollar General stores. Column 1 indicates the number of new applications for just Dollar General stores that have been received each year. So if you'll see, there have been 530 new Dollar General stores since 2010. There are 501 of those that are still in operation. That's the second column. Those are the ones that are active in 2020. The data that you will see here, and this is not, it's just an example. They've had some challenges. We're glad they're in Georgia. They service a lot of people, and they're very needed, and we want to partner with them. We want them to succeed, but thus far, they require a lot of assistance, and you'll see that in the data here. When we get into, it's one thing to be able to go into a food safety environment with someone that's operating correctly all the time. Well, that monitoring is obviously, it's just routine. But then when a routine visit turns into a violation, then turns into a revisit, you can see how on very restricted resources, how that will also contribute to reduction in visits where you might ought to be somewhere else. And when you reduce your frequency, it also increases the potential. The fewer times you're there, the fewer the increased opportunity is for even one of those good operators, to maybe slip a bit too. So if you're on a regular schedule, people stay sharp. But if you fall off a regular schedule and expand that, you increase the opportunity for somebody to make a mistake. Then every time there's a mistake, that is compounded because we have to go back and fix that problem yet again. And that's where we've got to find a better sweet spot with enough people paid correctly to do the job. And I hope that analysis is helpful to you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I saw the video that a news reporter had done on inspection to, and to me, do you ever tell those people that they can never, can you terminate them completely from having food? For that, they never should have a restaurant again.
Sure, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Well, I can tell you, they're under right now the most severe scrutiny and punishment and discipline that we are afforded by law.
Well, I don't think we should have to keep on going back. I'm just never revoke their license. Do you have that priority?
Yes, ma'am. There reaches a time that you do have to move on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that particular. That we have times when people. We reach a disciplinary action, and then ownership might change, and I can't punish someone else for someone else's failures.
But I think anybody that saw that would not want those people ever
yes,
fixing
ma'am.
food again.
And we do have in our regulatory authority, even in another completely different program right now, I'm aware of one person who does not that license has been revoked. There's been another company come in, and so I don't know that you can forever and ever do anybody but or prohibit that. I'd have to maybe check in a little bit with counsel on that, but I do know that the probationary periods, the severest discipline that we can possibly do, I can promise you is being carried out in this particular situation.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Bonner.
Thanks. Commissioner Black, I want to kind of go back to some of the salary kind of questions, and it does seem as though, and I'm assuming based on what I know of you and know of your department, that you've done some critical analysis in terms of those positions within your agency that actually essentially produce an income, produce revenue in terms of inspections and that kind of thing, to determine those points at which there's some diminishing returns on personnel that you need in order to generate that income. I'm looking at page 5, the critical salary increase request.
Yes, sir.
Where, and one thing stuck out to me that says we would propose to pay for these salary adjustments using incremental gate fees. Adjusting using incremental gate fees. I'm assuming that would mean raising those fees in order to.
Mm-hmm. No, sir. I think that what that means, Representative, is that if you're looking, that's one of the areas where you remember every fee we gather, we believe we don't those were returned to the state treasury. And then we have to come back and justify our actions for the regulatory programs and try to, I guess every year I've been doing this, I've been trying to compete for some more of those funds that we're actually generating. The law in several areas says that we are allowed to keep them, yet that conflicts with some other constitutional issues. So it's just better for us we have to return the dollars to the Treasury. The gate, when we doubled the fees 2 years ago for the gate program, those funds are only coming from farmers of this state. We reduced the number. We're very fortunate. Last year I reported to you, and I remember Chairman Powell had asked me if we raise the fees, how many gate cards are we going to have after that's over with? Is that going to be a barrier to entry? Maybe maybe discourage some folks that might not should have had one from doing it. And I said, well, we had 38,000 cards. I believe I'm just guessing, think we'll be at about 30,000. Well, we're at 29,000 and something. So, but when we raised those fees, instituted the Gate 2.0, we raised $2.8 million that were paid directly out of farmers' pockets of the state. Last year, you appropriated to us, if I recall correctly, I think it was just over $900,000. So the balance went to the Treasury. Now you could argue that we use that to pay some of our general budget, I guess, but those were funds that had never been collected, and I would suggest were never even contemplated in the revenue estimate.
Sure, understand. Thank you for that explanation. I guess for me, the perception that I would certainly want to avoid would be that we would want to put ourselves in a situation to give a non-merit-based pay raise across the board and put that expense on the backs of our taxpayers and those that are that generate fees.
In all due respect to the process, and I don't think you and I could be any closer in agreement with respect to, I've never considered anything across the board being terribly strategic. It kind of is cross purposes, but you know, we're going to do what we're told to do. We're going to do what you instruct us to do for sure. But I think I'm just always a big fan of recognizing productivity, and I want all of our folks to be. I think we have a very, very good team, but I do believe incentivizing strong behavior and better management practices is what pays off for all of us.
Understand. Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Gilliard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, you do so much with so little. The marketing dollars seems that's going to be a big target to decrease. About what amount would be proposed to be reduced in this budget for marketing?
Representative, I think it would be reflected on page 4 of the 21 proposals for as far as reinstatement. We'd love to ask y'all to consider that because it's very important. Back on the 20 document, you can see several pages in the back that give you better information about the things I told you that we were going to have to curtail this spring, and they give you the analysis of that. Also, there's a chart in this booklet that shows our net farm gate income, our power as an agricultural state as compared to our neighbors, and the ratio of marketing dollars that we actually invest as a state. And you will see that I thank you for your kind words about our team. This is a team effort. We do get a lot out of a little. Well, you know, we maximize the resources that you give us, but I also hope that our record shows that if we're able to invest a little more, we can turn 2 into 4 into 8 pretty quickly too, with respect to results. And so that number is $400,000 on our programs. The one thing is very important, and we talked about this a good bit last week. We have a $100,000 investment and purchase order that's already committed for our technology and our website. And I showed you the PO on that last week. We have to pay that, but that was cut. And so I guess we'll have to divert, if that line item is cut, we'll have to, we owe that money. So I'm going to have to pay that bill.
I just would digress for a minute to say that Georgia Grown, what you're doing with poultry and then the new expectations with hemp, it takes marketing dollars. It's going to take technology. We can't defray away from that. So I would just say that whatever we can do, we gave money in the ravaged storms of the farmers, and we talk about supporting the farmers, but I don't think we can take those marketing dollars away.
And thank you, sir. And I hope that we can. I hope we'll always know that when we do the investments that you make in us also strengthens our position to leverage for USDA funds, because the kind of the weaker we are here, the weaker it makes our call for that. And we should not rely on the federal government to be the, that'll be a partner, and we ought to go after all that we can get. But it's the same thing. I think we need to do what we should do, and the reason these cuts are here is because those are the ones we identified to match the numbers because otherwise we would have had to eat more into personnel. This was the cash and programmatic dollars that were not tied to personnel. But if we don't have these, some of our remaining personnel won't be able to do their job.
Representative Tarbin.
Mr. Commissioner, I was gonna ask this at the end, but since you touched on it, I'm gonna go ahead and, almost purchase orders for your expos or displays.
Yeah.
And, if you could, you may already have, but, tell us or get to the chair lady, about how much money we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
Is it in the new book here?
Yes, sir. It's on
Okay.
it's on this reinstatement line, and that one's $100,765.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Perkle.
Watson, excuse me.
Is it Perkle or Watson? Perkle.
Commissioner, thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
It's you were exceedingly forthcoming with the data that you provided. We ask for more drilled down analysis of the cuts and the recommendations, and you provided. And I thank you for all of this data that you have done. You run a tight ship. I think maybe not everyone knows, but I'd like to say it publicly. He treats state appropriations as if it come out of his own back pocket because it came out of ours. And he, time off to work on his building and things out of his own pocket. I talked to a constituent of mine who was on a trade mission with you, and he said, I just wanted to see where he flew, that he'd be in first class, and we back there, and he said, when the commissioner got on the plane, he went back and he sat down right beside him on the plane and coached and tied up and watched his dollars. And you spend our resources efficiently and where that were so everywhere. And I thank you. I want to thank you for that, first off. A concern that I have is in the reduction, and I'm sure you might share that same concern. You have done a marvelous job in building the Georgia Grown brand. It's a brand. It's a marketing campaign for Georgia Grown products, for Sam's Crooked Neck Squash and all these that we could put the Georgia Grown logo on. And y'all have done a marvelous job at that. And with the recent signing of the USMCA agreement, there's very little help, shall we say, for our fruit and vegetable producers. Not having much anti-dumping stuff, and one way that we can provide a safety net for the safety of our food in purchasing from Georgia producers is to identify it as Georgia Grown. My concern, that's a long way to get to this. If we've established this brand and we're building the brand, and now we're cutting funding to the brand that we've built up, will that have an adverse impact on the price that our farmers are going to see for their produce in the grocery store?
You're very kind with your comments. I'll try to live up to your first 2 minutes, and we will continue to try to do that. Representative, there is no doubt that there's no purer place where the economy is demonstrated, where the free market economy is demonstrated, than in agriculture. And it is supply and demand. We have a great supply. We must increase demand, because the only way that price is going to go up is if demand exceeds supply or is competitive with it. If we have great supply and low demand, low education, any pressure, anything we would do to take our foot off the accelerator will be counterproductive, in my view.
Thank you.
Representative Watson.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, good to see you. Thank you for being here. I got a specific question here.
Yes, sir.
I was just looking at the reduction in travel, and then out your comment explanation out to the side, it says, based on a recent analysis, if you're not able to purchase these vehicles in a timely manner, the savings would only be $220. Could you just kind of
Would you tell me where
it's
you
on
were?
page 1,
On page 1?
budget changes.
Third of the way down.
Top. The savings was supposed to be 354,
Yeah.
but are you saying that if you don't get the cars tomorrow that you're not going to save 354, you're only going to save 220?
That's correct. So there's I think the words we used previously that we're not sure if some of the proposals actually matched up with our analysis, and that's what our analysis is that's a little off. May I ask my CFO right quick? Jimmy, is that, would you drill down in that?
Sure. There are a couple items with the 354. When we originally proposed our budget, we assumed that we would be able to make reductions in our travel, just general travel, of approximately 107. And in talking with OPB, when they put this number together, they kind of combined the 107 and an estimate of about 254, 250-ish of reductions associated with the purchase of the automobiles. And the reason why we put the statement in here is that if we don't get the 500,000 until, let's say, April or May, the cutoff for purchasing the types of vehicles that we purchase will not allow us to get those in time to have them in the field by July. More than likely, it'll be September or October. And if that's the case, the savings that we'll be able to realize will not be the 254. It'll be somewhere less than that. And until we actually get the actual details on it, I can't give you an exact number, but it will be less.
So what kind of problem will that cause for y'all?
Well, it's just the fact that we will have an assumed budgetary reduction that we will not be able to realize, so we'll have to be able to realize those funds elsewhere. And again, we've already made some changes in how we do travel. Our travel is down approximately 10% now, and it's primarily where we're restricting travel. And again, as the commissioner said, all of those things have consequences, because now we're not sending people to the conferences, to the things they need to do to maintain some of their certifications and their qualifications. So all of those have consequences, and it's just a matter of how we manage through those consequences.
So you won't have the money.
Correct.
Thank you. And I guess just to follow up, if I may, being everybody else is kind of chiming in, you know, I guess I want to speak on behalf of the Georgia farmer. I mean, I'm a Georgia farmer, and when I decided to do this job, I came up here to represent the farmers and the people of rural Georgia. And to come here and see these type cuts just really hurt. And I guess the big question is, and I think I know the answer, but I feel like these cuts are going to impact farmers. They're going to impact rural Georgia. Food safety. You know, I just can't help to think about that with all that's going on. So important. It's become the front of our industry, and we're spending more and more every day to follow those rules and do what we need to do to make sure our food is safe. But I guess, and this may be hard to answer, but what's this going to do to Georgia agriculture? I don't mean to put you on the spot,
No,
but
hey, that's my job.
I mean,
No, sir. I mean,
I'm worried. We've got
I-
enough problems, and you know the problems we're dealing with right now, from pricing to increasing input costs, and still trying to beg and plead to get disaster funds and trade battles, and this is the last thing we need is something like this.
Well, for this state to be true to its mission and to be true with what I think most of us believe, anytime we reduce any strategic investment in what we do as an agency or what is important for this industry is not good. I'm going to be found. I told y'all last time. I think you know me well enough. We're going to provide you everything you ask us to do. I hope that I'm going to be found that if you ask us this, we're going to shoot for this, because that's this. I hope that's I'll always be found doing that. So I'm always going to advocate for what I believe is important for the state's #1 industry and for the state's #1 agency that binds those producers together with the other 11 million consumers of this state. What we do matters, and it's important to have the resources to do our job. And that's why I ask you for your help.
Thank you, Representative Watson. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner down here on this
Oh,
end.
yes.
Commissioner, thank you for the job that you do. You do such a wonderful job here in the state of Georgia, and we're very proud to have you and the agricultural products that you produce here in Georgia. One question. You on page 4, you describe 12 of the 31 eliminated positions that you wanted reinstated.
Yes, sir.
And Representative Watson asked what impact that these eliminated positions would have on farming. But my question is, what impact would these eliminated positions have on the public, the general public?
Yes.
Such as the food inspectors, the animal inspectors? How would that affect us in general, the general public, if we don't have the food inspectors?
Well, I thank my friend for your kind remarks, but there is a great symbiotic relationship because our job is to be on the tip of the spear for the farmer, but it's also to be on the tip of the spear for consumer, and we balance that. I think our team balances that quite well. Before I address impact, let me remind everyone, these were positions that were open. These were not, those two particular, the animal and food were not eliminated. We did not eliminate those people. Part of the reason they've been open goes back to our competitive issue of being able to find qualified people that would be willing to come to work for us at the pay that we're offering, and then be able to keep them, because that's been a revolving door. But there's, Representative Jackson, I mean, if we have 5 fewer people doing food safety inspections, then the gap between inspections will grow. And the vulnerability grows with that. We're constantly analyzing how we'll have to sharpen our pencil even more on risk-based assessments. I'm a big fan of that, because there are places that require us, we should be there more often than others. And that's just smart management in my view. And we've been doing that quite some time anyway. But that gap's gonna grow. Going back to the store analysis I provided you, remember, that's just one firm, and there are 500 more stores than there were the day I got here. But our staff is the same or smaller. And so add to that the other demands of a growing 11 million population, it's hard to keep up with. And that's why I promise you, I'm gonna continue to give you some hopefully strategic analysis of that, so we can plan for a state for the future, so we can serve your consumers.
One more question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
On those positions that you said that were they open the whole year, or?
At various times, yes, I can give you an analysis. We can provide that data for each one. I'm not exactly sure, but they were open at the time we had to make these budget cuts.
Okay.
And I know a couple of them were in that year range, and it might be remember, we operate off of regions, so in one region, it may be a little easier to find somebody to join us than it would be another. But I believe that's certainly in and around the Atlanta region for food safety, meat inspection, and fuel. That's very competitive. I've had fuel inspectors, we offer them, I believe, $28,000 a year to come to work. That's very difficult to find somebody in the Atlanta region to do that work.
Thank you. Representative Perkle.
Thank you once again. I apologize for not coming up. And Representative Jackson actually asked two of the questions I was going to ask. In this current climate that we're in now, one thing I know the governor and the speaker and our ag commissioner all agree on is agriculture is the number one industry in this great state. I've heard that a lot from people in this committee and everywhere I go across this great state. And one concern I have that Representative Jackson mentioned is that in a growing state, to be cutting food safety inspectors, spreading this out is concerning. But of the 31 employees or positions that we're looking at having to cut, how many of those do you not need?
Well, I'll answer it this way. I don't know if I'll quantify the exact number of positions, but I'll tell you this. Had we been in a different posture coming to this committee, I mean, if we'd have had a different posture making the budget proposals, I would not have been on, I don't know exactly what the final number would be, but I just figuratively, I'd say this to you, rather than a $2.4 million cut, I can promise you, I was going to ask you for $2.4 million to enhance some strategic positions, to expand some of that to serve a growing state, and also to get our competitiveness at least a step towards the right direction.
Want to get this question, Madam Chair?
Yes.
The caveat to that, or the other side of that, if you were to have additional funds, how many employees that you do not need would you hire?
I think that would be zero.
Zero. Thank you.
Representative Riddle.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Been up here,
Riddle,
been
excuse me.
quiet.
Riddle.
I just got a question. I think that I can get an honest answer from you since you're a fellow elected official, not appointed. Whenever y'all go do these budget cuts and y'all sit down and y'all look, do y'all make the 100% of the decisions on what you're going to cut, or do y'all propose something and the OPB or governor's office says, well, no, I think you need to cut these instead, or how does that process work?
Okay. Based on my memory, typically what we'll do is get instructions in about June, because everybody knows that you turn these documents in September 1st. There's an online process that where you have to fit the rubric that is given to you. Okay. Then there's a point in time when we're given some planning notice with respect to our GO bonds, and that's typically late June, July. And if I recall correctly, even this year, that instruction was to plan on 3.5 million. That sound right? 3 million, 3.5? Okay. Then we received instruction and direction, if I recall correctly, I don't remember the exact date, but I believe it was the start of the second week of August. And it gave us instructions to turn in our budget along with a strategic plan in a different format other than what we had. And to do a SWOT analysis, which we did, and we've provided a summary of that which we did. But we've had strategic plans that are far more detailed than that. So what we did is took what we did and fit it into what was requested. But it was told us to cut beginning with October 1st, that those we had 3 weeks to make those plans. And we had 3 weeks to make those adjustments. And then those had to be prepared to implement on October 1st because we received instructions that those funds were going to be retained. And so that's when we first made a commitment to our employees that we're not going to furlough anyone. Because the horrors of that in the past, what that does to morale has an enormous cost to it. We knew that there was no way that we could get through this without impacting people who currently had a job. So there are individuals that do not have a job today that either, I think we began those reductions November 1st, and then some took in effect January 1st. Our gate compliance officers no longer, our call center was under contract. That contract was terminated. And then we had several full-time employees that unfortunately were released. But so all of that occurred from our time of instruction to the time of turning the paper in was 3 weeks. But we did not, no sir, all of the decisions that you see here, I take responsibility for all of them.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So who answers the phone now if I have a problem with my gate card?
Well, we still have some in that area, but it's just some of that's been rerouted to the divisions.
Okay, so we're asking our employees that already need raises to work harder for the same amount of money.
We have divided those responsibilities. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I assume that's part of the 920,000 down here in your marketing and promotion. And along those same lines, as I know you mentioned yesterday that you were going to be implementing, hopefully very, very soon, some disaster funding that would be coming down, and you were going to be the administrator of that. Well, you're reducing your staff. Are you going to have the manpower to implement this and carry this out? If the block grant funds come, are you going to have the staff to get this rolled out and get it to the people that have been waiting on it for a really, really, really long time?
Yes, sir. Thank goodness I can give you a positive answer on that. And the reason is, under a federal contract like that for the hurricane block dollars, that's $347 million that we're about to do the contract on. The federal government also lets you have up to a 5% administrative fee that is in a separate line item, not 5% out of the 347, but 5% out of operating. Our budget calls for 1% of that. And even that I had to do a little bit under duress with USDA, because they're just saying you don't have enough money to run it. I said, I know what we can do. Is we'll have a completely different team of retired bankers, retired county agents that we're about to employ and pay for them out of those administrative fees. But I still have my policy team, everybody, and you know how all our crowd's been working on this, and we got to run through the tape on that. Nothing's going to let up, but the implementation of it, and then the CFO may wind up pulling in 3 or 4 processors that will be paid for out of the administrative fees that are authorized by the federal government.
Okay. Last one, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, and I'm sorry. This just was very concerning. I know Chairman Corbett had a hemp bill in Ag Committee yesterday, and I know you also have to have funding for that to take place and for the Georgia farmer to plant hemp in Georgia if he wants to this year. And I don't think there's any money in the budget right now for you to be able to verify to the USDA that you can plant or we can grow hemp in Georgia right now.
Mr. Chairman, on page 8 is we were getting to the last part of the request. That is the itemized requirement. by our best judgment of what is needed on an annual basis for us to get into this business. And as we taught, let me reemphasize the terms that we've discussed before. And those terms are, under the federal arrangement, authorization, certification of authorization of appropriation. That is the hanging chad it still exists for us to have our hemp program approved by the federal government. If you want us to have a program and expect us to administer it, then the 20 budget the requirement is 200,000, so it's a quarter of it. And in essence, I mean, that's 791 or 800, whatever you want to call it. It's a quarter of that. We will need that in order to institute the grower license portion. We're going, as we committed yesterday, the processing license component of the law that you passed does not come under the purview of the federal agreement. So we can advance, and we're going to have a license available for processors by March 1. If you're looking at a pay-go arrangement, those license fees for processors under this current law, I think the law, the bill introduced yesterday will alter those, but that'll be moving forward. But for this license year, that fee's $25,000 per license. So if you get 10 processors sign up, there's $250, and maybe the appropriations process would recognize that. But the last sticking point is this. It's not necessarily, I hope that we could have a letter. I know several members of the body have asked, could we have a letter that has leadership's commitment that the money's going to be there once the little budget and the big budget? Is that enough for certification of authorization of appropriation? I commit to you that that is enough for me to submit it. I do not know if that's enough for USDA to approve it, but we will do our best.
But Commissioner, I'm paying a gate card fee that goes to the general fund. If the processors start paying their fees and the growers start paying their fees, that money's going to the general fund.
Yes, sir.
So how are you going to get that money back to run the program?
I will not unless you appropriate it.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate.
Commissioner, thank you again for being here today. I had another question, but you started your comments on hemp. I really like where you're going with hemp. I mean, look, we're getting our lunch eaten on hemp on the West Coast. Oregon is game on while we're sitting here not moving forward at all. So, I mean, I think that's a trait of a great leader that is looking for raising revenues to be able to pay for these things, because we can hire a junior manager to cut cost. That's what they do. Great leaders find new revenues. So, you know, we're getting our lunch eaten on that subject. But as I travel around the country and even around the world, people find out you're from Georgia. They always go Vidalia onions. Mm-hmm. They go Georgia peaches. Mm-hmm. Georgia pecans. Now, these guys that are sitting next to me, they all claim to be farmers, and they brought me none of that, by the way. I'm just saying. But last year, Representative Jackson and I spent one of the days off, and we went out to Gainesville to the poultry lab.
Yes, sir.
And Mac and I learned about the ecosystem associated with the poultry industry. How big, where do we rank Georgia in the poultry industry?
If Georgia, as a state, was a country on the face of the globe, we would be the 7th largest poultry producing country on earth.
Okay.
We're the #1 state in America by far, and that also includes table eggs and the genetics side of the business. We have the broiler operations, which we all enjoy, and many of you have if you, well, one thing about it in Georgia, most every representative, if you don't have a poultry-related company in your district, you do have one next door.
So, as we learned about this ecosystem, because it's extremely complicated, you know, it came to mind that there are opportunities for things to go wrong there without inspections. So when we end up in the news, Georgia, 7th largest producer in the world of poultry, because something went wrong, because we didn't inspect something, how much money are we going to spend to fix that?
Oh, that, the cost of repairing a problem far outweigh any type of investment you put in on the front side. That ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure comes real true when you're talking about what you're doing. Let's make sure that we understand, though, on inspection where our responsibilities fall. From a food safety inspection and a meat inspection, when it comes to poultry, poultry is federal. So the safety integrity of the chicken in the counter for all of us, that is federal. Where our key responsibility is in disease detection and then response should there be an outbreak of something like highly pathogenic avian influenza or something like that. That's where over 200 of our folks have training in that regard, and we hope that as we conduct exercises and training, which is monthly, to respond. Our hope is those are responses we never have to take. But by gum, we're going to be the best in the nation. I believe we are, and I just because we have we're the largest producer, we have a deep commitment to be the best prepared should something like that happen.
Well, we appreciate the work you're doing on that. Thank you.
Representative
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I think we're going to be the best in the nation when it comes to hemp.
Come on.
I feel that we're going to be just as, I went to Canada and they're doing a lot of great profit in reference to hemp, and meeting with some people yesterday and last week. I want to commend you and all of those individuals that have taken the lead to move Georgia forward in reference to the hemp industry. I just have confidence that this budget that you have is kind of minimum for what you need. And I know you're trying to work things out. It's a trial and error to see how we can design it to fit Georgia. But the marketing dollars, I'm going back to that again. Do we already have dollars in place to market moving forward? I know you said we had some funds that were.
With respect to hemp, no, sir. That's not. That needs to be a part of that forward thinking, and they'll fall right in with the other things that we're doing. I think we've had 2 or 3 hemp companies that are trying to. They may have organized at the Secretary of State level. They've not organized at the regulatory level yet, but have expressed a desire to join the Georgia Grown program, and I think our folks have been talking to them, which that's wonderful. Glad to have them join, and we want to do what we can to help them too.
Everywhere I go, when House Bill 213 was passed, every time I go in the store, I reiterate to people this oil, this cream. It's all over the place. The stores, the beauty stores, have now got hemp soap and candy bars and all the above. So you can see that people are following the level of where you're going with the hemp industry in Georgia. So I would hope that we would just give the Department of Agriculture what we need to make it move forward.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for your service.
15 seconds, Madam Chair. The next step of this is going to be the food safety side, because see, we're still operating somewhat in an unknown territory, because the Food and Drug Administration at the federal level has it still has quite a ways to go with their regulations with respect to food. Is it an ingredient? Is it a food? How do you treat it? How do you inspect it? How do you ensure the integrity of it? And see, that once we adopt a hemp program, and we have the Georgia Food Act I'm satisfied with all the responsibilities you give us in that regard. I'm satisfied we're gonna be back to you in years to come, figuring out how are we going to fund regulating this product as a food. And I've tried to say that in every conversation we've had about hemp moving forward. It's not about, oh, no, that's a negative comment. No, it's a reality comment. Because what we have to do, if we're going to prepare, we ought to be the best. And we ought to say, Oregon, we're going to put you out of business intentionally. That's it, because we're the best, we're going to do this. But if we're going to say that, then we have to make sure that our programs are adequate to it's one thing to brag about it, it's another thing to do it. And we've got to be committed to do it. Sorry, Madam Chair.
I had several questions. When we talk about food inspectors, I know back this spring we had a lot of blueberries coming into South Georgia that were not locally grown. Who inspects these coming in? Because, I know we can only spray our things for certain pesticides and can only have certain labor. But all these fruits and vegetables that coming in from the outside the United States, we don't know what we're eating. Who inspects them when they come into the States?
Well, that's the USDA, and then there's FDA involvement on some side of that. But it's a federal government responsibility at the border. I think we'd all be.
Do you ever check them when they go in the grocery store to make sure that they're all right?
Yes, ma'am. We do from time to time. We do pesticide residue analysis. We did a very focused study last year on pecan because there are some growth inhibitors that are not authorized for use in America that have been reported to being used in Mexico. That we have not found those residues yet, but those are some kinds of things that we have a special capability, and in the Tifton lab that y'all have invested in for years is I still say the best in this nation, and that's why those just adding some strategic technicians to allow us to do this kind of work, I think it's going to be that much more important. I think with USMCA, as Chairman Watson, we've talked numerous times about, okay, we've got an agreement. We got to make sure we enforce it, and there are many issues of trade policy that I think need to be enforced, and I hope they're going to be enforced in a more with more discipline than in the past. But I think what we've got to, if we're going to protect our producers, then we've got to invest on the food safety side of it to make sure that they're not at a competitive disadvantage, and that our consumers can know the truth.
Okay, and the next question regarding this fees, and we were talking about the gate card. And you raised the fees on the gate card. Well, if you had enough money to run the gate card as it was, why'd you raise the fees?
Oh, I didn't raise the fees.
The legislature raised the fees.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, why did we do it if it was self-supporting as it was? I mean, it shouldn't be used as a moneymaker.
At that time, I asked that question.
Okay.
During that time. Now, there was some discussion and thinking, if you remember, when we were sitting around looking at 36, 37, 38,000 gate cards, and we had, there was some question as to whether people thought that was too many.
Well, to me, if we have the money, that it should be used, the fees were used to run the gate program, not as a moneymaker, and we should use those fees to have the call center and the things we're supposed to. The same thing really goes for hemp too. It shouldn't. I don't think we should use that as a moneymaker. I have a problem with fees, but I think we need a fee to run the gate card. We need a fee for hemp and a lot of fees on different things, but it should not be used as a
Madam Chair, I might even go a step further. I don't know if the body would accept it, but it's just a point of fact that, to my knowledge, in in Title 48 where all those sales tax exemptions are, I believe the farmers of this state, the only people that pay for the privilege of what we give them under law.
Okay, thank you.
The farmers of this state are the only people that pay for the privilege of having a sales tax exemption. Now, they did so willingly. Every one of our farm organization friends that y'all all know well, they said, that's fine. We're even good with raising it if it will ensure the integrity of the program and keep fraudulent activity out. I think we've proved that we've done a good job in that.
Well, and I think we should use the money that way,
But
the way we agreed to.
But there's a fundamental question: should people even pay for what the law allows them to do anyway?
Well, since we're paying for it, I think we need to use it right. I'm not saying you didn't use it right, but
Yes, ma'am.
But thank you, and thank you for the job you're doing. And if you have any other questions, if you'll submit them to Morgan.
Oh, very kind. Thank you.
And she will get with the commissioner. Thank you. Public Service Commission, I think I saw them come in. Thank y'all, if y'all will come on up. Commissioner Eaton, you can sit at the table or at the podium, whichever one that is. Sit at the table. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
You ready to? It's hard to see you there.
Thank you. Okay.
You ready, Madam Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Sure. As you mentioned, my name's Chuck Eaton. I'm the chairman of the Georgia Public Service Commission, and I'm joined by Tom Kraus, our PIO, our Deborah Flanagan, and our executive director, and Tom Bond, our head of utilities. And I think first I have to say I'd be remiss, given the general theme here, that if I didn't mention that we've had many public witnesses come in and make presentations on using hemp to generate power. So, but pardon me.
Yeah. Are you serious?
We've had a couple come in. I don't want to get your hopes up. But, you know, I've had the privilege of presenting in front of you already. I know this is 2021. The themes are very similar, so I expect this will be a brief presentation. Overall, our 2021 budget, we were cut 7.3%, and which is a little over $733,000. What we've done in the 2021 budget is we've maximized our federal funds to continue in the amount of $70,000. We've eliminated our National Association and training partners, suspended that. That's $60,000 in savings. We've all but frozen all travel. That's $79,000 in savings. We've done some administrative cost restructuring for $40,000 in savings. And we will benefit from employees who are retiring, and we will not backfill those positions. And we expect that will be about $485,000 in savings. And I touched on this a little bit in the previous meeting. I mean, especially my office happens to be right next door to our legal team, but I see it very specifically with them. I mean, we've had, at the commission, we've had 4 to 5 lawyers since I've been there. We now have, we just lost our most senior attorney, the most experienced one when it came to dealing with Vogel and the utilities. He retired literally last week. We now have 3 full-time employees and 1 contract attorney who's not getting benefits. The contract attorney was brought on with the expectation to be able to replace the senior one. He's left. To put things in perspective, we have 1 attorney now who passed the bar 7 years ago. We have another attorney that passed it 3 years ago. The third, the contract attorney, passed it last year. The most senior attorney is eligible for retirement next year. And we will be, in 2 years, knock on wood, we will be going through the final Plant Vogel hearings, and we will be up against some of the most well-known, experienced law firms in the country with massive staffs, and that is who we will be going up against. And they are very promising young attorneys. Of course, we always run the risk that they could leave us as well. And that's who we will be going up against. And as I mentioned before, at the commission, we're a judicial body. So it's not where we just sit here and say, we're starting at zero and this is what we're going to hand you. They come in with a litigated position up here. And it's our job to scrutinize that position. And I've heard analogies given, almost find Easter eggs in it, identify those issues and work through it, saving millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so there are a few agencies for a $10 million budget. That's what our overall budget is. There are a few agencies that have the impact on Georgians' everyday life that we do at the commission, especially with the largest construction project in the history of the state of Georgia looming over us. And so that's just, and we're experiencing that with all of our departments. But I thought I would specifically touch on it with the attorneys, since so much of what we do is hearings and litigation. We cannot, and I touched on it, we cannot, these cuts that we've made are not sustainable. For instance, the $60,000 that we're cutting from our national organization, that's where we send new employees to train. That's where we've sent commissioners to train to learn about the job. They provide invaluable research to us. There's so much going on in electricity and energy today, especially on the solar front, figuring out how you fit that into the grid, how you fairly compensate that without having the ratepayers subsidize it. This is research that's occurring on a national level that we will no longer have access to without reinstating our membership or reinstating our dues with this membership. And again, along those lines, withholding travel to our staff. They can't attend these events. I touched on it a little bit. I mean, so now we're down to 81 employees, which is almost identical to what we had in the Great Recession. I've been on the commission now for 13 years. When I joined, we had 106 employees. And so there is, obviously I'm subjective about it, but there is literally no fat left to cut. And we're in a situation, as I touched on in a 2020 budget, where we have furlough days. If we stick with this, we won't have furlough days in 2021, which is a good thing. But as I mentioned, these cuts are not sustainable. We cannot continue to allow senior staff to retire from the commission without backfilling those places. We should be training these employees now for some incredibly huge cases that we have coming up. And another thing that's not sustainable, I live in Atlanta. I don't personally benefit from it, but we have 3 commissioners that are required by law to live in districts and have to commute a fair distance. I mean, my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Shaw, lives 3.5 hours away, and we've eliminated their per diem out of this budget. And frankly, I don't think that's fair. They're required by law to live in these districts, and that's not sustainable either. And so I will touch quickly on, I mean, we have a couple revenue solutions. At the commission, we do pipeline safety, which is funded 70% from the federal government, and we do our best to maximize that. And then we have Call Before You Dig, and that's fully state funded, but that does generate fines that are associated with that. And the problem is what we do is, part of it is because the state auditors want highly experienced folks in the pipeline safety area, and so do we. And so we have a tendency to move those trained folks in Call Before You Dig over into pipeline safety. But what's happened as a result of this budget is we're not able to backfill those pipeline safety positions. And how it affects the state is, in 2019, we collected $552,000 in fines, and that went straight to the Treasury. Today, as of in the first quarter of fiscal year 2020, we've collected $33,000 in fines, and that's simply due to the fact that we are short investigators in that department. and fewer investigators equal less money. For $150,000, we could hire 2 more investigators and return an estimated $300,000 of the pipeline to the state treasury right off the bat. And as another area that I've mentioned is pipeline safety that is regulated by the federal government. They audit us and they score us. And one of the areas that we never score well on is that our penalty structure does not align with the federal government's penalty structure. In a lot of areas we're too light, but there's some other areas where theirs is more definitive, where ours can go on for a long time. But if we could find somebody, or if we wanted to move forward, it would have to be done with legislation, but that would make our fine structure in line with what the federal requirements are. We would score 100% in that area of our scoring from the federal government, and potentially get more money from them, and also avoid the risk of losing money in the future by scoring poorly in that area. So, that's where we're at with our budget. I thought I'd present a couple areas that we could generate revenue, and I'm now, Madam Chairwoman, open to any questions.
All right. 15. Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, the Call Before You Dig program, are y'all eliminating that program? Do y'all, is that under y'all?
Well, no, we're definitely not eliminating it, but we're in a situation now where we're short employees in that program, and so we're just frankly we're not able to get out there and investigate like we should be.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty, and I know from a personal experience, that's a pretty valuable program. So I really hate to hear that. We like to do a lot of digging down there where I'm at, and sometimes we get ourselves in trouble. But I hate to hear that. And I guess the follow-up is, obviously we kind of heard the same thing from the Commissioner Black about services. From your comments, I can't help to think, but services provided to Georgians are going to be impacted. Is that not true?
Well, Mr. Chairman, yes. I mean, especially in the area of Call Before You Dig and pipeline safety. But our services aren't quite as direct as Commissioner Black's, but I would say, as I mentioned before, indirectly, there's few agencies, I dare say there's no agency with a $10 million budget performing the work that we do, whether it's rate cases or largest construction project in the history of Georgia at Plant Vogel, keeping a watchful eye on those expenses, providing the scrutiny, because those expenses go straight it goes straight to every Georgian when it comes to Plant Vogel, because obviously the EMCs and the municipalities are sharing in that project. And so this is something that impacts Georgia's every single month when they have to pay their bill.
Well, that's kind of what I hear you saying, is we're making some small cuts, but they're going to have a huge, very expensive, long-term impact on our state.
That's certainly my perspective on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Commissioner, thank you for being here today. I want to ask you about the pipeline safety. So if I understand correctly, you're saying that we're probably not at the highest ratings on the federal standards. Did I get that right?
Yes.
So we're not
yes, that's
scoring
correct. There's a
at the top.
scorecard. We score very well in the other categories,
Okay.
but that's just simply a situation that our rules, our fine structure is not aligned with what the federal government wants.
So what would it take for us to improve in this level, and then what would be our return on investment in that if we were able to reach, the top levels?
Well, I think so we're talking about the scorecard.
Yeah, one
Is
of
it
the
the-
items on the scorecard is our fine structure. That wouldn't cost the state anything. to
Could
change
you please come to the mic?
Yes, come on up here, Mr. Bond. I apologize.
I can hear him.
Sorry, I tend to talk loud.
This is Tom Bond, our head of utilities.
One of the things they score us on is our fine structure. And our fine structure is based on state law. The feds have a $2 million per incident fine for pipeline safety, or up to $2 million per incident for pipeline safety violations. The state law is $15,000 for an incident plus $10,000 per day. So if an incident goes on for a long time, our fine can be very high. But if it's just, one day, one-time explosion, our limit's $15,000.
When was
Well,
this?
and we like to
when
avoid
was
those,
this-
but
When was this enacted? When were the fines enacted?
Well,
Just
the
put it-
fine statute is,
When was it last changed?
I think in probably about 20 years ago, it was increased from 10,000 to 15. The issue is we have the same fine for everything we regulate. And so what the legislature conceivably could do is keep our fine structure the way it is for the other companies that we regulate, but for pipeline safety, where you've got, some real public safety issues involving, gas leakage and stuff like that, add in a separate statute or a separate provision to the existing statute, having a separate fine structure for that.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a good idea, because pipeline safety with gases, you could make major damage with one of those leaks.
Yeah. Another major part of the scorecard is how much training our pipeline inspectors have. The feds have a program in Oklahoma where our inspectors have to go out there about every 6 months and get training on various topics. And to be a standalone inspector, you have to have a certain number of training programs that you've completed. And so attrition is always a problem, because we lose an experienced inspector who can go out in the field by themselves, and we replace them with a new inspector who can only go out in the field accompanied by a senior inspector until they've had, at least 3 or 4 years of training.
Have you worked with any legislators about presenting a bill this session to increase the fines?
we're currently discussing that within the PSC and coming up with what we think might be some legislation that would work, but we have not approached a legislator yet.
Well, time is running out, so if we're going to do it, we need to move on it. How much more federal money would you pull down if the rating increased on the fines?
What the feds have done is, I think we're getting about maybe 5% less federal matching than we could as a result of this.
How much do you get now?
70%?
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Yeah, it's 50. We're getting 55 now. So we got 5% more of our pipeline safety budget. I don't have that number with me, but it probably be 5% of a couple $1 million.
Well,
So is
that adds up.
So is it 5,500 did you get out of the 15?
No.
55%.
Oh, 55%.
Yeah.
Percent.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I may, Madam Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
just one last thing. I don't expect you to comment on this because it's a case, okay? So don't comment. But we had a case in South Central Georgia where pipeline incident where there was a building that exploded and 2 young, beautiful women were permanently and forever harmed on this, could have been killed, but they're going to have issues for their entire life. And as I understand it, well, I'm not going to get there. I'm not going there because I know it's an active case. But I do want to point out, I know you know this, and then I'm sure the committee knows this. This is a very serious issue because you can have someone in a building blocks away from a pipeline if you've got an issue and have it explode. We saw it happen here. So if there's something that we can do to help, to further this cause, please let us know. Okay.
Yeah, and that case really ties into both the call before you dig and the pipeline safety, because you can have incidents where somebody's digging, they hit a gas line, and then they hit a sewer line, and the gas goes up into the sewer line and can go into buildings a couple blocks away.
Thank you.
Madam
Representative-
Chairwoman, I would say very quickly that apparently we have reached out to a few legislators, but they're looking for our guidance on,
All right.
on it. So.
Good, thank you. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, and I think most of the questions I had were already asked by the chairperson and Representative Morrison. But one question I have, I heard you talk about reduction in force, and I heard you talk about furloughs. How many employees do you have that make $40,000 or less?
Five.
You have 5. Are they state funded or federal funded?
It would be state funded.
Thank
We
you.
don't have any federal under 40 now. No.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Thank you, and thank you for coming, and we'll be back with you. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Do you want to take a break right now? Can we take a short, we're going to take a short break right now for about 10 minutes, okay?
How many more we got? Just one? Speaking on.
I think is everybody back now? Let's wait for Matt.
They're here.
Where's Matt?
He's on the edge.
Okay, see, okay, everybody's back. He's hiding. Okay. Who's next? I forgot who's next. Where's my sheet? Here's my sheet. Okay, we've had public service, we've had agriculture. You can have forestry. What would you forestry so we can go if you want to? Commissioner Williams, we got forestry. Would you like to be at the podium or at the table?
I'm gonna be at the podium, and my two support team members are gonna be at the table if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Pleasure to be before you today. And I want to, Madam Chair, thank you and also thank Morgan of your staff. I've been fighting a little pesky head cold. I think we were on for yesterday, and y'all were kind enough to work with us on rescheduling today. And with the wonders of modern medicine, I'm here. If I say anything very much out of order, that means that some of the drugs I'm on have taken effect, and would ask that be stricken from the record. But it is a pleasure to be before you today, and want to, in particular, thank Morgan for her support through this budget cycle that we're working on. Madam Chair, she has gone to lengths to understand our budget and what we're doing, and it's a pleasure working with her. So, Morgan, thank you very much for that. Madam Chair, we had been asked to provide as much level of detail today as possible, and we will strive to do so. To my far left, your right, is Gary White. Gary is our Deputy Director of the Forestry Commission and serves basically as our Chief Operating Officer. Most of the primary Forestry Commission units, such as management and protection that you're familiar with, report up through Gary, along with other functions. To Gary's right is Michelle Gray. Michelle is our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, and they're the ones that try to keep me out of trouble. I know you have a tracking sheet in front of you, Madam Chair. We did not bring, intentionally did not bring handouts because we wanted to have the opportunity to sort of walk through a few things with you and not have you distracted by trying to follow along in a handout format. Obviously, we've shared a lot of what we will cover today already with Morgan, and we will share any more level of detail that you may want after today's meeting. So again, the tracking sheet I know you have in front of you, one of the issues is the way that our budget is configured. The tracking sheet basically has 4 operating units that it breaks down. If you see that, commission administration, forest management, forest protection, and tree seedling nursery. And for us, there are several operating entities or subunits that are under each one of those, particularly forest management and forest protection. For example, forest management has our forest stewardship program in it, our state lands program in it, water quality, state forest or state lands, and urban forestry and forest health. And then under forest protection, from our standpoint, there's the actual protection world, the folks that fight the fires, if you will. There's also the RFD, the Rural Fire Department program, where we work with rural fire departments, helping them bolster their equipment needs to help us, in turn, keep wildfires suppressed, and then our communications and public relations department. And then the tree seedling nursery itself, you'll see a fair number, or you'll see zeros there for state funds. Some years ago, the state told us that if we were going to be in the nursery business, that needed to be a self-sustaining business, not competing with the private sector. So from the state funding standpoint, Madam Chair, we continue to run that seedling nursery on that basis. What I want to do is take a few minutes and just run through with you what our plan is at this moment in time to meet the governor's proposed budget of and particularly the reductions there, and talk about how we plan to do that, our level of confidence in doing that, and then sort of what our fallback position is if our level of confidence plays out to have been maybe overconfident, how we will find additional savings. Our target reduction that came out in the governor's proposed FY21 budget is $1.894 million. You can see that down on the bottom right of your tracking sheet. So that's the number that we've been working towards, Madam Chair, to figure out for FY21. How do we find that? You've heard us mention in previous testimony using what we refer to as LAPSE, L-A-P-S-E. That is simply a term that we use in the HR side of our world to say if we have a forest ranger that leaves us for whatever reason, it's normally going to take us a couple of months from the time he or she leaves until we go through the advertising process and the interview process and the hiring process, and that person actually comes on our payroll. So we figure that it takes, in general, for most of our positions, an average of 2 months, if you will, from the time we say we're going to fill that position until we fill it. So we've picked up 2 months' worth of savings, if you will, on that position just from that. As I've mentioned earlier in our amended testimony, we have also added an additional 2 months to that basically says that we're going to extend any vacancies by an additional 2 months, subject to, on a position-by-position basis, reviewing that 2 months. So we're picking up between the sort of the built-in 2 months and the additional 2 months lapse savings there, which we think will total, close to $400,000. Again, we're looking for target savings of basically $1.9 million. We think through lapses we can pick up, Madam Chair, around $400,000. Then in our regular operations, we're looking to pick up savings of approximately $150,000 in equipment and vehicle repairs. And one way that we're planning on doing that, we have actually, over the past year or so, sort of revisited and ramped up our preventive maintenance protocol on all of our equipment, from passenger vehicles up through fire suppression bulldozers and transports. We're probably one of the last heavy equipment fleet operators of our size that went to engine oil analysis by John Deere and Caterpillar with a fleet the size we have. For years, we'd just been changing engine oil based on a timeline schedule, if you will, and we said the whole world has moved to really using chemistry and the high-tech world to analyze what's going on in those engines. We've done that. So we think that we can, by actually spending a little extra money, if you will, on preventive maintenance and being smarter about how we do that we can pick up maybe that $150 in equipment and vehicle repairs. Travel, like other presenters already this morning have alluded to, we obviously, as soon as the governor's budget instructions came out for the 4% and the 6%, we started looking much more closely at a category, that category being travel, an area that we already looked at very closely, I feel like, and we think that we can find savings. We know we're already finding savings in travel. And I will just, Madam Chair, I will use a personal example, if you will. Last week I needed to be in Tifton for a 7 a.m. meeting. Normally living in Athens where I do, that would have meant an overnight travel and a stay at probably $150 a night in Tifton. Instead, we have some very rudimentary barracks at our facility in Macon where some of our trainees stay when they're there for week-long training. And so I bivouacked in the Macon barracks overnight and then got up the next morning and drove to Tifton. I was there for my 7 a.m. meeting, and the state kept that $150 in its pocket overnight. So those are the kind of things that we're all doing, and I'm trying to lead by example on that to make sure that we can get where we need to be. Utilities, as simple as asking people when you leave for the day, make sure the lights are turned off and make sure you don't have an air compressor that's running in the shop constantly that doesn't need to be running. Those type things, we're already seeing some efficiencies there, and we think we'll pick up $40,000 or $50,000 in utilities. And then fuel expenditures, there's not as much we can do there outside of obviously curtailing vehicle travel. When a wildfire breaks out, the transport's got to roll, the dozer's got to roll, and we can't impact that fuel much. But as it relates to state funds, Madam Chair, we think we can maybe push $200,000 in annual fuel expense over to probably federal grant funds or other funds. So that would be how we would look to pick up some dollars there. So the savings I just went through total around $450,000, $460,000. That's a pretty good start towards that 1.9 million that we need to pick up. The next category I would mention would be vehicles. We heard Commissioner Black talk about his vehicle issues. Basically, our posture on vehicles is going to be if it's not bond funded, or if it's not funded with other funds, i.e., particularly federal funds like through Forest Health. Sometimes we're able to buy pickups for some of our Forest Health specialists through federal funding, or it's not an insurance settlement. We basically will not be buying any motor vehicles, any automobiles, if you will, out of normal state appropriations. Same thing on equipment, whether it's dozers or heavier duty equipment, again, bond funds or other funds, no direct state appropriations there. We had planned some computer upgrades, particularly printers, if you will, for FY21. We're going to put that on hold. Some of that also includes radios. As dependent as we are on reliable communication equipment, and as fast as the technology changes, we're always really chasing ourselves as far as radio communications equipment for those fire suppression vehicles in particular. And so we will affect some savings there, along with the computer world. Probably $100,000 is what we'd expect to pick up in FY21 there. Close to $150,000 savings, Madam Chair. We several years ago installed GPS locator devices. We call them SPOT, S-P-O-T devices on our fire suppression equipment, the chief ranger trucks and the dozers, so that in the field or in the office we can see where that equipment is at any moment in time. It's a equipment and certainly a personal safety initiative that we have to know on wildfires and natural disasters where that equipment is. We think we'll be able to shift that sort of annual subscription cost of around $140,000 to federal or other funds there and pick up that state savings. We pay about $165,000 a year, if you will, to participate in an annual burn permit program, the 1-800-OK to burn program, which allows people to secure burn permits, if you will, over an 800 number. We think we can shift that also over to federal funding, picking up $150,000, $160,000 there. So I know you weren't trying to keep count, but what I just ran through, according to our rough math, will pick up about $1.8 million. And again, 1.8, 1.9 really rounded up is what the number that we think we've got to meet coming out of the governor's budget there. So we feel good about that. Our fallback provision, if those savings for whatever reason don't come about, and this is probably as good a time as any, Madam Chair, to remind you of what I've shared with you before, and that is for our core operations, particularly on the protection side, how much the weather variability impacts us. Whether it's wet or whether it's dry, that impacts us on the expense side and the income generation side. And what I mean by that is right now we're sort of in the heart of what is normally Georgia's prescribed fire season. Governor Kemp signed a proclamation last week, or earlier this week actually, proclaiming this Georgia Prescribed Fire Week. So under normal weather conditions, those landowners in the state that use our services to help plow fire breaks and use prescribed fire, there would be a lot of that going on. Well, the weather we've had, it's safe to say that we're a little bit behind the curve, if you will, in providing those services, and that is a fee-based service to landowners. So we're not generating the revenue as we speak for plowing and burning. At the same time, we're not expending funds for wildfire suppression. So depending on the timing of when we have wet weather or dry weather, that will impact us either positively or negatively as far as both expenses and income generation. The same thing applies, I've mentioned before, the fact that when our neighbors, particularly out to the west, have wildfire issues, we oftentimes respond to their requests for help, and we will send anything from individuals to teams out west to help those folks fight fire. For us, that's a great training opportunity, and they come off of our payroll, if you will, while they're out there. So they're picking up training, their base 8 hours per day is coming off of us, and generally they're making overtime. So the employees tend to love it. We love it within reason, but again, depending on Mother Nature, whether they're needed outside of our state boundary or not, comes into play there. It was mentioned by a couple of the early presenters, y'all have asked about the $1,000 pay raise that has been mentioned for employees that make under $40,000 a year. Like other presenters have said, we don't have any specific instructions at this point, whether that would be an across-the-board mandate or whether that would be a budget enhancement, if you will, that would come to us in a lump sum, and then whether merit would be part of how those dollars would be parsed out from from our agency to those folks making under $40,000. I do know that our total head count is at the moment is 566 employees. At the moment, we have 328 employees that are currently making under $40,000 a year. So 328 out of 566. So we have run some calculations there. For us, the calculations are even more complicated. As you can imagine, the majority of those employees making under 40 are the men and women in our ranger ranks, because the starting pay for rangers now, thanks to y'all's support last year, we got it up from the 20s to $30,000. So starting pay for a ranger now is $30,000, but you can see a ranger has to put in a good bit of time and move from a Ranger 1 up to a Ranger 2, Ranger 3 to even be approaching that $40,000 number. We've also got foresters, men and women with 4-year college degrees from an accredited school of forestry that make under 40, and in some cases they're working in programs that are not fully state funded. Those programs may be forest health, may be water quality, or partially funded by federal dollars. The numbers that are in the proposed budget are based just on state salary dollars alone. So we may have a forester that's making $38,000, but half of his or her annual salary is covered by federal funds. The amount of the $1,000 pay raise that's in the budget, as we calculate it, basically is just for the state portion of that. So if the instructions to us as an agency were anybody that's making under 40, give them a $1,000 raise, we would either have to cut that $1,000 back agency-wide, or we would have to have additional funding beyond what's in the proposed budget, if you will, to account for that fact that, again, all of these folks are not fully state funded. So I would just ask us all to keep that in mind as the dialogue continues at a higher level than I operate at, I'm sure, on the $1,000. Unknowns, and I'm going to talk about a few things in just a moment, Madam Chair, beyond what we went through just a few moments ago of how we would propose to meet these cuts. Unknowns, I've talked about weather. This is really getting into the weeds, but we're dealing with a situation now. If you look at our transport fleet, our heavy-duty trucks that transport the fire suppression dozers, those vehicles sit a lot more than they roll, and that's just the nature, somewhat like municipal fire departments. So we've got a situation that we've been looking at for several years, and we partially addressed a few years ago, and that is the age of tires, T-I-R-E-S, probably a subject that y'all have heard Chair Lynn Smith talk about tires a lot. But we know that there is an age component of tires at a point that a tire is no longer safe to operate regardless of how much remaining tread life it has. Our neighbors over at DOAS have some recommendations there, no hard and fast rules, but they generally say that on these heavy-duty trucks, somewhere probably 7 to 10 years, depending on whether it's a steer tire or a drive tire, is when you should be looking to replace those tires from a safety standpoint. The tire industry itself does not have any hard and fast standard rules. But be that as it may, if we use, I think is a 7-year number, we basically surveyed our tire inventory that's actually on our fleet, Madam Chair, and if we use a 7-year rule right now to upgrade every tire that we've got in our fleet that's 7 years or older, we're looking at $600,000. That is a number that is not line itemed anywhere in our budget. That's a number that, we could push out a little bit, but as an agency manager and for you as a legislative body, we know the last thing we want is to have a transport either disabled on the side of the road when it's responding to a wildfire, or even worse, heaven forbid, a blowout when that transport is meeting a minivan full of kids headed to soccer practice. So those are the kind of tough decisions that we will have to make. Our plan was, if the budget were flat or even with an incremental increase, our plan was to address the tire situation this next fiscal year. We would still like to do that from a safety standpoint, both for our employees and the public, but we would just have to see whether or not we sort of kick that can a little further down the road and hope for the best. Other ways, again, I'll wrap up with this. If the savings opportunities that I mentioned earlier don't get us where we need to be during fiscal year 21, we're looking, we've got a couple of retirements coming up of people that we may just not replace those positions, if you will. That's probably nothing new. We've got some administrative support at our area offices around the state that support fire suppression. Currently, each area has an administrative person in there. If we have a couple of retirements there, we may just not replace those folks and tell some other folks they've got to double up on their duty. There we're talking, depending on whether it's one or two, you're talking $50,000 or $100,000 savings. I guess sort of the elephant in the room that we have looked at, and it's been alluded to earlier, the morale issues and whatnot, is furloughs. We have taken a close look at if we were to be in a position of having to utilize unpaid furlough days to meet our budget directives, what it would take. And we have run several different scenarios. I'm not going to get into the minutia of those with you today, Madam Chair. Again, we will provide as much detailed information later as you may want. But what we've looked at is a scenario that would try to put most of that burden would increase the burden as you go up the pay scale, I guess you would say, so that if you will, those entry-level folks that are those rangers that are making $35,000, that their number of furlough days would be the lowest. Let's just use an example of 2 days for the fiscal year, and that number would ratchet on up through 3 or 4 different tiers up to where the 4 or 5 highest-paid folks in the agency would possibly be looking at 12 furlough days a year, 1 a month. And sort of the models we've run there, we think that, that sort of using that 2 to 12 would probably, if we implemented that fully, we could probably pick up $400,000 in savings there. We obviously hope we don't have to, because that creates, in addition to the issues you would think about, our fire suppression rangers deal with being on call for no pay now, so a lot of weekends, Johnny may not be actually working, but he can't be more than 30 minutes away from the unit because he's on call if a wildfire breaks out, so he can't go to the lake, can't go to his kids' ball games. We don't pay them unless they're actually dispatched. So if you're furloughing folks, that could mean that Johnny's basically on call every weekend. And pretty soon Johnny and Mrs. Johnny are not going to be happy with that, and we're going to be looking to replace Johnny in our workforce after that plays out. So as previous speakers have alluded to, some of these things we're looking at are sort of short-term solutions that we see to try to meet the budget mandate, but they're not really long-term sustainable solutions, if you will, Madam Chair. So that really is how we would propose to deal with the scenario that's been set before us by the proposed budget. And Gary, Michelle, do y'all have anything to add before we open it up for questions?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, we'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I got several. Just hang on right here. First, at one time y'all did the reading of the water meters. Are y'all still doing that, or has that been moved?
No, we are still reading meters at one time, and we now contract directly with EPD at one time. I think that was being run through the state soil and water commission, but we
That's
now
right.
contract directly with EPD, and we are currently in water meter reading season.
Okay, and do y'all get paid for that, or how does that, is that just the service, or do they move
No,
some money
there
over?
is a contractual arrangement there. We get paid. Michelle, do you have those numbers?
It's roughly $18 per meter. It usually
Okay.
totals about $250,000.
Okay, if I can continue.
Yeah.
Last year, and you kind of alluded to it here at the end, you came in, you was talking about that there was some vacancies open, y'all was shorthanded down in the South Georgia area, mainly, with staff, that people was having to stay on call all the time. And so we're still in that same position, but now we're looking at having to furlough people, so that's even gonna put y'all even in a worse bind if something happens, is that correct?
Yeah, the funding that came through, I guess, a year ago in the budget for both rangers and foresters, there was money in the governor's proposed budget a year ago for rangers. The legislature added money for foresters. That's where we were able to get that starting pay for rangers from $27,000 and change up to an even $30,000. And that has made it, I don't have the definitive data in front of me. That has certainly made a difference in our ability to not only attract but retain folks that we need to attract and retain, and sort of cut down on that revolving door. And obviously, any furloughs equates to a pay cut. That there's no other way to do that math. That's the reason that as we look at furloughs, we're trying to posture ourselves that if we have to go there, that the higher paid employees will bear more of that burden. Philosophically, I think that's what we need to do, but I recognize that we may have folks at mid-level and up that are living paycheck to paycheck as well. So I don't take that lightly, that higher paid employees just across the board can absorb a furlough day any better than anyone else, but we think, generally speaking, the less burden we can put there on our entry level and lower level employees, the better.
Okay, and lastly, you was talking about the $1,000 raise, and we're kind of all in the dark on how that's going to be. You said you got 328 employees. Is that through all three of these departments?
Yes, sir, that is agency-wide.
Okay.
That is agency-wide.
So, like down here on the force protection, it shows there's $428,802 for $1,000 raises. Then up in the forestry management, there's like $10,000, and then in the commission administration, there's another like $14,500. So basically $450,000 right there. How are they coming up? If you've got 328 employees, we're going to give them a $1,000 raise. How are they coming up with those numbers? And you're not the first person I've seen this on. That's the reason I was asking. Maybe you knew.
Michelle, will you address that from the CFO standpoint?
Sure. Basically, our forest management program is heavily federally funded, so we are between 30 and 35% of our pay for that program is federally funded, and OPB's calculations were strictly based on the state-funded portion of their salaries.
Okay.
So that's.
All right.
To put that another way, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, we have in front of us numbers that you don't have in front of you, but we sort of calculated the difference that would be needed, if you will, to get to a real $1,000 per employee that's making under 40. And our calculation there is that it would take an additional $77,000 and change, correct, Michelle?
Yes.
$77,183.52 to be exact is what it would take beyond what's in the proposed budget if we were going to actually make a $1,000 pay adjustment to every employee that's making under 40, regardless of the makeup of their funding source of their salary.
Okay, and that's where I was wanting to see if it was like everybody else is coming up short, even though you did the $1,000.
That's our number.
And the last thing, if you could, in your opinion, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine. We can talk afterwards. But if you're appointed to run this commission, and I'm telling you, you got to cut all this stuff, would it not make more sense? And then I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to give everybody a raise to let you appropriate that money where it needs to. I mean, it make more sense to me to keep people there, not furlough them, instead of giving everybody a $1,000 raise. Because you may have somebody that just came in 5 months ago, and you may have somebody that's been there 10 years, and they're both making under $40,000, but both of them's getting a pay raise.
Well, and from a technical standpoint, I've already had a discussion with our HR director and with Michelle. It obviously can also create compression issues if you're looking at across the board and you've got an employee making, $39,900 and his supervisor is making just a little more than that. And we have those situations. Then you bump that person down here $1,000 and suddenly they're making more than their boss is. So we would certainly have some compression issues there that from an HR standpoint we would need to look at. I would just say this, as an agency director, I respect the budget process and I respect the role of the governor's office and OPB and the legislature in this. Certainly I would like to have as much flexibility as possible to manage our agency and to be able to move the pieces around on the chessboard as we see fit. But I'm really concerned, if you will, about the morale issues. The pay raises last year, not the 1,000, but the support y'all gave us to get those rangers up to 30,000 and to also help foresters was monumental in helping morale within our agency. And as I said, not only morale, but that translates into attracting and retaining folks. To go back now and to take away through furloughs or whatever, all the goodwill that we sort of bought with those pay raises a year ago is problematic. But we will play the hand that we're dealt.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do a good job.
Thank you. Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. All right, I've got a statement and 2.5 questions, okay?
Yes.
So on the pay raises, here's the half question. Do I understand it correctly that if you have a person regarding the $1,000 pay raise, that if half of their job is funded by the federal government, then they would not receive the full $1,000 increase? Is that how the calculation from OPP took place?
That is how the calculation works, correct. If their salary was half federal and half state, basically OPB allocated them $500, correct, Michelle? Rather than $1,000, since the state's only funding half of that salary.
So if you're a state employee, do you care if your money comes from Forsyth County or Glenn County?
We literally have situations where we've got foresters that are sitting side by side in offices or cubicles doing, in some cases, similar work, but they're funded by different programs, and that would be a prime example of where one would maybe be in a position to benefit from the full 1,000, the other one maybe not. And to them, this thing about where their money comes from is not their issue. It's the issue of the three of us and working with our federal partners. And we love our federal partners. Our agency would be a shadow of what it is now if it were not for the federal support we get. But at times like these is when that federal funding becomes, I don't want to say problematic, but it challenges us to treat everyone fairly.
So I've spent a lifetime in staffing, okay? Attracting, hiring, retaining top talent is the goal of every great organization, okay? If you go out and dole out an unfair pay raise among your employees, you're going to create problems and you're going to lose people that you don't intend to lose. If you move into the furlough realm of things, I can assure you that the furloughs are going to create instability within your organization, and you're going to lose the people you don't want to lose. You're not going to lose the people that will do anything to keep their job because, that's the way it is. Typically the most underperformers, they're not going to leave you, right?
Right.
But you are going to lose people that you don't intend to lose on that. So I would encourage you to avoid that at all costs, if you're asking for my opinion.
Thank you.
And we certainly want to help you with that. So that's on the people side of things. I do have 2 quick questions for you related to equipment. And I don't even know if there's a state mechanism in place to do this, but have you looked at the opportunities for liquidating aged out of equipment or maybe equipment that you no longer need because of mission changes? As a way of reducing your cost and maybe raising a little revenue off of them?
Yeah, equipment for us is a real big part of our agency. It's a real capital intensive part, and as Chair Lady Houston knows, for a number of years we have been the beneficiary of basically a managed process that the legislature implemented several years ago of sort of helping us have a plan rather than just sort of every year, hoping for the best in the budget and in the bond package. So whether it's fire suppression dozers or the heavier transports that move those, there's a sort of an ongoing process there. We actively participate when we're bringing in new equipment and rotating out old equipment. We actually participate in the state surplus equipment program. We're always looking at that to maximize the return we get on that used equipment. Sometimes we have used equipment. I mentioned the rural fire department program. Sometimes we have equipment that's suitable rather than selling it at auction, if you will, for wholesale, to repurpose it and put it out there. But we very much look at sort of the used equipment stream as far as its cash flow and value to the state is really just as important to the taxpayer as what we're spending on new equipment up front.
And finally, I'm sorry, one last, I promise, just one last quick question. Regarding sitting equipment, you mentioned that a lot of the lifespan of your equipment sits idle. Are there opportunities to capture revenue off of that sitting equipment? Have we ever looked at that and said, like, this particular vehicle maybe could, if we're not using it for 4 months and we know that the likelihood of it going away, is there an opportunity maybe we could lease that to someone that could use it, either another agency or outside of government? And now I'm done.
That's an interesting point, and it's a point that the three of us and others in our agency have had, particularly over the past couple of years since I came on board, because again, we are somewhat of a seasonal operation as far as fire suppression. As I mentioned earlier, and within that seasonality, the weather, I have been giving some thought to, both on the equipment side and the personnel side, are there ways that we could partner up with other state agencies? For example, DNR. Are there times that we're not as busy as we are at other times on fire suppression that we could be providing maybe some manpower and equipment support to the DNR Parks Division or Wildlife Management Division, if you will, keeping our folks sharp, keeping them engaged, keeping them building those partnerships, and then at the same time, maybe some of their folks be able, through training and whatnot, to help us if we get into a wildfire situation before we start having to ask our neighbors in Texas or Oklahoma or wherever. So I think that's something that is a state agency. I certainly embrace that cooperation and maximum utilization of resources, whether it's human capital or equipment. That's something we will be looking at further as we go ahead. Thank you.
If you can sort of make your questions short, because we've got somebody else coming in and we've got another agency to hear. Not cutting anybody off, want everybody to have to say. Representative Watson.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Thank you. Chuck, on the raises, if you have to furlough, will that offset a lot of the raises that you're about to possibly give?
Offset in what manner?
So if we give them a raise, but then we end up having to furlough, then the raise basically comes back off and doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, again, the model we're looking at for furloughs would impact those under 40,000 the least, if you would, and that's one of our reasons of thinking that. Why give somebody a raise and then boom, turn around and take it back through furloughs? So those that would potentially be the beneficiary of the raise would be least impacted, but at this point, our model that we're looking at, everyone has some skin in the game as far as furloughs.
Okay, and then I've heard this from multiple agency heads and we were told that services were not going to be impacted and Georgians were not going to be impacted, but I'm concerned that they may. And I know a large part of your cut was your operating expenses, and you've touched on a lot of this. And I know what you do with the equipment, and I've seen it at work. And you mentioned tires and diesel and DEF and bearings and blades, and there's so many unexpected things that happen with you guys that we cannot control. It's just like farming. There's tons of expenses that come up. And the last thing we want is for something to happen and we not be ready, which is why a lot of our equipment does sit. And then again, the more you run it, the more wear and tear you have, the more maintenance you have, and you're cutting your budget on your maintenance and operations. So I guess I say that to say that's just kind of concerning that You do have so many unexpected things. It's hard work, and it's rough on the equipment. You're not on a green grass field somewhere. You're in the woods.
Yes, sir.
So it's just tough work. So,
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your understanding of that. And again, you know, we think that if what we're looking at here is a relatively short-term scenario, we can manage through it. If it's anything beyond short-term, i.e. one fiscal year or so, then it really starts to cut into our long-term ability.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, are you, on the Georgia Technology Authority, are you reducing the funds, or are you alleviating the contract management on those? I see you have that on several entities of the proposed budget.
Michelle, can you address that?
Those were put in by OPB. Those were cuts by GTA, I believe, too. There was a contract management system. There was some services, I believe, some contracts they did not renew, and they passed that savings on to the agencies.
So they're alleviated totally out of contract management.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you, Madam
And
Chair.
I didn't mean to rush out at the
No.
end, but somebody's going to be using this office, and we've got economic development coming up, and
I understand. If anybody has any follow-up questions,
please.
feel free to get with us.
yeah, thank you.
Thank
and,
you.
And you've always been real open with us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, we just, if we don't get through with this, we'll just have to come back next week, because we were going to be here working all week, okay? So,
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the
Thank-
committee. Thank you for being here today, listening to us. A lot of great stories out there. Some of them not so good, most of them not so good.
thank you, Mr.
A lot of
Longfield.
questions have been on the personal services, that $1,000. As far as I know, there's two basically rates that we're looking at for fringe rates. One is about 59%, the other is about 61%, depending if you're on the old state plan or the GSEPS program. When I did our calculations, the money that we got was for the $1,000 plus the fringe rate. So they gave you the money to cover the fringe plus the $1,000. Like I said earlier, if you give someone $1,000, it's actually costing you $1,600.
How many employees do you have making less than 1,000?
Less than 40,000.
I mean, 40,000.
We have
Excuse me.
31. Most of them are in tourism. Most of them are at our visitor information centers.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Basically all of them.
All right.
And so we don't see a negative part to that. I mean, we feel good about that going across the board. It's not, I don't look at it as much as growing across the board as these people, you know, are the ones who are greeting the 13 million people that are coming through the visitor centers. They're making $26,000, $27,000. So it doesn't impact our agency like some other agencies where you're hearing, you know, 65% of their pay staff is under that. I know in the essence of time, I'll just try and gloss over some things, and you guys can hit on wherever you want. When we talk about our department, about 84% of our budget is made up of personal services and marketing. We're the state's sales and marketing team. We're across the globe, across the country. We go everywhere. That's what we do. When we are looking at most of our cuts, with the exception of admin and arts we're cutting some of the grants, some of the newer grants that were put in this year, the facilities grant, since it was a 1 year in, we're looking to take that out next year. So that was something we felt would be easier felt across the board. In admin, we're kind of like the utility player for the department. So when I'm cutting in administration, I'm cutting from various areas. I'm taking a little bit of regular op. I'm taking some money out of telecom, rent, a little bit of marketing. That's the least area that we have marketing dollars, some in contracts. So our budget is broken out into 8 divisions, and we've tried to go across the divisions and cut them between that 4% and 6%. In 21, it's a little over 6%. I think our overall cut is about 8.07. So most of our cuts, when you look at it, we do have a few positions that we're not filling. People have left, so we're not filling them to help with some of those personal service gaps. One of them is in tourism. You'll see on, I think I gave you, Morgan, is about $150,000 for 2 positions in tourism that we're not filling. One of them is partner relations. The other one is content.
everything we do as a department is about outreach. It's about content. It's about visibility and making networking connections. That's what we do. Our cuts in marketing are going to affect us as far as where we're going and what we're doing. We will go to less trade shows. We won't have as many people going to trade shows. And someone may think right off the bat that, well, not as many people going to the trade show, but you're still going is good, but there's a difference because having more people work the floor in those trade shows helps our outreach. If I'm one person at a trade show and I got a line of people coming to see me, other people aren't going to want to wait in that line. So it's important to realize that we will be there, but we won't be there in the same force that we normally would be. We're also reducing some of our marketing sponsorships. We're not eliminating sponsorships, we're reducing some. So if we're doing $10,000 sponsorship somewhere, we may cut it back to $5,000 and things of that nature. That's a lot of what we do. If you have any questions from the tracking document, if you're looking at that, like I said, in the administration division, that's the 23-1. We're getting the cuts from multiple areas: equipment, contracts, telecom, computer. The computer cut is significant because everyone knows about, the people trying to get into your computer system and hacking and this and that. Our core network is about 10 years old, and a lot of people, I heard some people talking about IT. A lot of those things, when they get older, they don't meet the warranties anymore, things of that nature, and so they really don't have the support if you're calling up a Microsoft or someone like that. You've probably all heard about the Windows 7 problems they had. Everyone had to go to Windows 10. So, it's a great scheme by Microsoft, but we all have to follow in line with that. So those are the type of things that we are doing. We have implemented a lot of security as far as protecting against hacking and things like that, but some of the things you just can't do with the cuts. In film, we're reducing marketing. We're just going to have less. We have a program, which is the Camera Ready program. What we're looking to do this year is put a little more meat on that in the website, where if you went out and looked at a film that was done somewhere in the state, we would like to put like a video around that and show what it was and say, hey, fried green tomatoes were done here and there. You hear a lot of talk about the rural Georgia. Film is perfect. Tourism and film is perfect for rural Georgia because you can go there and not really spend a lot of money from the state perspective. Film comes in, they film, they come, they go. Good revenue stream, and they can pretty much film anywhere. They can, put the Brooklyn Bridge anywhere. They can make it up that way if you see these things. So that's an area. Council for the Arts, their big cut is the grants. The facilities grant was brand new this year. Since it's a 1 year in, we're taking that out. That's a $300,000 hit.
Which one was that? You're going a little fast. Which one?
Council of the Arts.
Council for the Arts,
okay.
that is 23-4.
All right.
Okay? That's the $300,000. That was a new grant that was put in this year, facilities grant. Our main concern with the arts facilities is important, but it's really arts education. It's really promoting the arts, helping the artists and things like that. And some of the money we use is also getting students around the state to different art things and things like that. So that's very important. So we felt that the newest grant we could cut and would be that too much bad blood on that, we hope. Global commerce, we're cutting contracts and marketing, and there was an additional cut for regular op. We have contracts around the globe. We're in 11 countries around the world. We're in Japan, we're in China, we're in South Korea, Israel, we're in the UK, Munich, we're in Canada, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, Chile. So we have representation around the world. Some of these contracts, we're just having to pull back on some of the contracts. We had a considerable amount of money in China, and we're cutting back on some of our China initiatives, so we're getting a lot of that there. We also had outside contracts. We had you hear from all my predecessors here talking about mentorship and having people come in, the turnover and things like that. We had a contract with an individual who was basically mentoring our newest project managers when they come into the system. When we get someone that come in as a project manager, they're hitting the road right away. They're dealing with C-suite executives all over. They're dealing with community people. And so we had an individual that was on our staff from a contract standpoint that helped them get caught up to speed a little bit quicker. And so that we're eliminating that. We also had a contract with a recruiting group. These people were versed in economic development for years in the state, and they were helping us when we had an open position to help find recruits for that.
someone would say, why don't you do it yourselves? We are busy. That takes a lot of time when you're recruiting to find the right person and vetting through all that. So we felt that it was more profitable for us to have a contract with that. So those two contracts amount to about $100,000. So we're cutting back on that area as well in global commerce. International trade, which is 23-6, we're getting the money there in marketing and contracts. That contract area is going to be a tough call. We're really going to have to sit back and see what we're wanting to do. The issue we have with our contracts internationally is we want these people to be in the most visible places. We want them to be where the action is. Those type of people, higher rents, higher cost of living, it costs a little more. So when we go out and we put these contracts out to bid through DOS, we have to put maximum, amounts, limits on what we're looking to do. You want someone that can really present you and present Georgia well, it does cost money. So this next year with these cuts, we're going to have some serious conversations in the trade division on what we're going to do on the contracts. We're going to just have to look at it real hard and see what we want to do. We have our current contract in Canada. She is retiring, so we may look to go a little cheaper there. Well, we're just going to have to see. We don't have the answer yet, but we know we have to revisit all the contracts and see what we're going to do. The rural development, that is one that is probably hitting us the least because that's 23-7. There was a move of money last year for personal services, and the amount that was moved, that person was making more, so we just cut that differential out. That makes up that $75,000. And so we were able to do that. Small minority business, which is 23-8. For clarity purposes, we really look at our global commerce team as the global commerce plus small minority business. They all work together as one. We work with all businesses around the state. We don't pick and choose. So we really roll them together. All those people report up to the Deputy Commissioner of Global Commerce. And so their cut is personal services, $20,000. Some of that has been through attrition. People are leaving, and we had some people with a lot of years of experience there. So incoming people don't get the same rate as those outgoing with 20, 25 years. The other area is contracts. We have some money in contracts there. Again, like I said, that folds into that global commerce. They all work together in funding all those contracts around the globe, those 12 contracts around the world. Then the last area is tourism. Some of the additional cuts this year of tourism is mostly pass-throughs to our department. So they do affect tourism, but they don't affect us directly because those are money coming out. The Georgia Historical Society was cut $100,000. They received an additional $100,000, I believe, 3 years ago, from $160,000 to $260,000. That was a $100,000 cut. Civil War Trail is getting cut $25,000. They are, I believe, additional $25,000 put in their budget about 3 years ago, so that is coming out. The new RVIC program. We had an RVIC program back in the early 2000s. I believe the final money got cut out about 2011 to 2012. There's about 63 RVICs around the state. We operate the visitor information centers, which are on the entry points to the state. The regional visitor information centers are located in the state around different communities. We received an additional $150,000 this year, so we're putting those grants out. Morgan and me have been talking about those grants. We'd be looking to cut those grants out this year. One of the nice things about that grant is we've been able to put a tourism impact calculator that we put on our website, and the community so far are loving it. So they're basically be able to go in and say, okay, we're putting on, I don't know, a Blueberry Festival or something like that. We're inputting $15,000, and they can talk about what their expectations are. The financial calculate and give them a number about what basically they should expect from revenue streams from that. So that's something good. We're hoping to keep that. And then, like I said earlier, we had two positions that we're not filling. One of them is the content person, the other is partner relations. So those are, try to go quickly, but try to be, cover most of the things there. A lot of this covers what we went over last week in the amended budget, so there really wasn't that much difference, just a little bit more cuts that we had to reach out a little further. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, tell us about
I'm the CFO, but thank you.
You mentioned rural Georgia and
Yes, sir.
FIMS, how good it was for rural Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the camera-ready communities.
So we have 159 counties, and the deputy commissioner of that division thought a few years ago that it'd be a good idea if we could get the communities to be camera ready. So that means when I'm going to your community, there is a person designated that the film crews or whomever has interest can call. And they make that process so much easier because there's a lot of permitting that is involved and a lot of things like that, street closures, things like that. So by being film ready, it's a good plug because they know when they're coming in, if I want to look down at Randolph or wherever I'm looking, here's the contact, I can call them, and they're going to make my life a lot easier because they know what's needed to be done and how and who the people ought to reach out to get that done. So that's the camera ready. What we were hoping to do with some marketing money is put a little more behind that and say, hey, this film was filmed here, and maybe show a film clip or talk about it or something like that. And so, you know, we don't have it now. We're going to hold off on that, but hopefully we can get to that.
I hope so too. It would need, we really need that in rural Georgia.
Yes, I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give me an idea of regarding the sponsorships you mentioned? What is an example of some sponsorships that the department may do?
Okay. Well, we do so many. I mean, most of our success, a lot of our success is we work very closely, you know, public-private partnerships. I mean, the Deltas of the world, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Georgia Powers, the utilities. I mean, I don't know if you've all heard of the group public-private called the Allies, Georgia Allies. Mm-hmm. And so we have about 18 members in that. The unique thing about the Georgia Allies is we look at companies that will basically help all of Georgia. Those that believe, and you know, it sounds, you know, banks, okay, utilities. They know that the more the population, everyone's going to benefit. Rising tide, you know, all that. There's areas like what you're talking about in rural Georgia. You know, John's Jams. The only way John's Jams is doing better if someone comes down and sees it. But these other partners in the Allies, the Comcast, the banks, the utilities, they know that everyone that's coming to Georgia is going to have to use one of their services somewhere. So that's a huge public-private partnership that we do. Right now, they're down at the quail hunt, part of that we're doing right now in South Georgia. So it's things like that. The other sponsorships are, you know, trade. I'll give you a bunch of examples right now. The foreign trade, during foreign trade conference, that was just going on this past weekend down at the coast. We cut our membership back from $10,000 to $5,000. Sundance Film Festival in out west, we're cutting that sponsorship back. So it's things like that, different trade shows and things that look to Georgia, that look to our department to sponsor, to help promote that program. We're going to do pretty much probably 90% of our sponsorships still. There probably may be some that are cut out, but we're going to do it at a lesser rate.
Thank you. I would love to see those types of sponsorships really shift to our business community instead of the government dollars going towards promoting an environment where we already have like I said, the Deltas of the world, the Coca-Colas, Georgia
Mm-hmm.
Power.
No, they help us.
Understand,
they chip in. We don't sponsor their events.
We spend $5,000 to $10,000 for sponsoring an event in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, some are in Georgia, some are outside the trade shows and things that we go to.
And I can understand outside of the state.
Yeah.
But to me, I guess I've got it just raises a bit of a flag when we promote Georgia inside of Georgia, when we have chambers of commerce, other business related folks that really should be the primary sponsors and,
Absolutely
and not
right.
our tax dollars necessarily promoting Georgia inside of Georgia.
Yeah, and Chamber of Commerce, we work with them, the Metro Chamber, Georgia Economic Development Association. But again, it's kind of like a partnership. We're all kind of working together. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We about beat this $1,000 raise to death, but and some of those starting salaries are quite eye-opening to me. But in your opening statement, you said $1,000 raise cost $1,600.
Yes, sir. With fringe benefit.
Well, I don't have to cover it right now, but I would like to see how the employer side of $1,000 raise is $600. That's pretty stout. That's 60%. And
60%, yes. FICA is 7.65, retirement is 29.4, 21.4, and then health is 29.4.
The health doesn't go up proportionally.
You pay for health even if someone doesn't take your health insurance in
I
the
know,
state.
but it doesn't go up because you get $1,000. It's not based on salary.
Yeah, if I give you a $500 raise, that's going to cost me 500 times 1.61.
Okay, so if our state insurance is based on, a payment's based on salary, not a flat.
That's what we get charged as an agency. Now, how the Department of Health does that, I don't know, but we pay
Okay,
that.
so I'm gonna make it short, because we're late. But if you give $1,000 raise, if you go from 20,000 to 21,000,
Yes.
your health insurance costs you more for that person.
It cost me 29.4% on that $1,000. Yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't know insurance was based on.
For like I'm saying, for the agencies, that's the way we're charged.
Okay, you give 100 people a $1,000 raise, that's $100,000. You should just have 100 insurance policies. They should not go up a percentage, but I will stand corrected, but I will be quiet. I will.
But yeah, we pay for based on people. Even if you're not taking the health insurance,
Yes, I understand.
we get charged as an agency. That's
And I said, you're
Yeah.
not getting extra people. You're going from $3,000, $30,000 to $31,000. Health insurance should not go up because you gave somebody a raise.
But I'm
Okay.
guessing what they did on the back end of that
Okay.
is that to keep our rates as employees down.
It
which
just
they've kept
just
down.
caught my.
Yeah.
Because
I
the
understand what
reason
you're
I'm
saying.
saying that, because we've heard from different agencies so many different things
Yeah.
about.
Well, that's
and
the
I-
way it's calculated,
and
and,
it-
that's the way we pay it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You're
I'm
welcome.
not questioning what
Yeah,
you're.
no.
I'm just amazed that that's the way it is.
Yeah, it.
I had a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
You said something about you cutting the rent at one time, somewhere in here you cut the rent.
Yeah, well, admin, as the commissioner said a couple of weeks ago, we're kind of the utility player. Our budget is broken. Some of the divisions, lion's share of their budget is personal services, marketing, and contract. Admin has rent, we have the telecom, we have the computer. We pay for a lot of that for the department, okay?
Okay.
When you look at rent, you have usable square feet and rentable square feet. That rentable square feet is a lot higher because a lot of the corridors and things like that, no one's actually using. What we're gonna have to do in the admin, if we take some cuts, is I may have to appropriate some of those expenses out to other divisions now that I basically taken the lion's share for in
What
admin.
do you mean other divisions?
So right now, I'm charging you by your office space. So you have 4 offices, 1,200 square feet. I'm not charging you for any of the common areas.
Right.
I may have to charge that out to other divisions because admin is paying for the whole thing right now.
Okay, several years ago, didn't we put some more money in the budget for y'all's rent?
Yes, we've been in
Do you
this.
still need that?
Well, we need it. Our rent goes up 2.5% every year. We're off the hill, so we're at a individually owned building, and that was the first rent increase we got since 2004 when we moved into the location.
But it goes up every year now?
Yes, ma'am.
How long are you in that contract for it to go up every year that much?
Well, the nice thing about it is when we did this contract, when we moved from the other place, we got it in for year to year, but for 30 years.
Okay.
So right now, the current rate in that location is about $45, $46 a square foot. We're paying $25.
Well, that's a good
Yes.
rate. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Gilliard.
Boy, it sure seems like taxation without representation around here in the Capitol. Film industry, one thing I just want to appeal to you on, you're cutting back on the marketing and all the above, so I understand
Yes,
that.
sir.
But in the meeting recently, what I observed from what we did in Savannah is each municipality should invest in reaching out to market and try to draw the industry into their own cities.
Absolutely.
So there wouldn't be a big need for so much in your office. I've been looking since I've been here at the extra fat that might have been in the budget, not discrediting anyone, but there might have not been a great need. In Savannah, we took Savannah Economic Development Authority.
Yep.
We invested some of our revenue, likewise in Garden City. So wouldn't you encourage those municipalities to
Yes.
do the same? And then
Well,
we can,
I'm sorry.
And then we can cut back some more
Yeah, I
revenue?
mean, Tripp and the team down there do a great job. I mean, Savannah's been one of the top cities for film, there was an article that came out. Some of the areas don't have that, and so Savannah is unique. I mean, I'm a northern guy. When I heard about Georgia, I heard of a place called Augusta for the Masters. I heard about Savannah, Atlanta. There's other areas around the state that need that help. That's why that Camera Ready could help to put in there.
But can I say this to you? Why not take your staff and work with GMA or ACGG and get the information to the municipalities in reference to giving them the proper training so they can do outreach and recruit for their own communities?
Mm-hmm.
Because not even your office can suffice to get all over the world and bring it into all those areas.
You're right. That's a good point.
Thank you for your.
All right, I've got two quick questions, and then we have a public comment. Two things. We've asked several times about your marketing for state parks.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that in the budget? How much do you spend marketing state parks?
Okay, I was ready for this one.
Good.
So, let me find it. We do a lot of marketing for the state parks. We do a lot with DNR on our website. We do joint sponsorships with them, co-op programs for them. They're in our travel guide. That is, we get 650,000 travel guides each year that get dispersed out to all our visitor centers, and people call into the call center. So we're always working with the state parks. They're actually in our travel guide and on contacts into our website and
Okay.
Explore Georgia. So all of that is, we're working with
Good.
state parks.
Thank you. The next thing, agriculture is the number one thing to do business. And I know they have a marketing part in Department of Agriculture. Do you do any marketing for Georgia products? Since it's the number one, not number one state to do business, number one business in Georgia.
I would know our trade division.
I've heard number one state to do business, it just comes out.
Yeah, there you go. That's 7 years in a row, yes.
Yeah.
But we work with them, agriculture, yes. I mean, our trade division and, working with communities and
Do
all
you
that.
have somebody that works full-time with agriculture?
Well, we did have SUSTA. I don't know what happened. I'd have to get back to you on that. We did have the SUSTA, the Southern U.S. Trade Association, and that was working jointly with the Department of Ag. Some of that was federal money. That I don't believe we get that funding anymore. We do work with them, but we don't have anyone in our division that is specifically for ag, but we have people in our trade division that is working various things. It may be agriculture, it may be advanced things like that. It's not just one person for that.
Okay, but it just seems like since agriculture is our number one thing, that y'all would be marketing agriculture a lot too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? And we have one person on for public comment, Amy Hughes. Thank you. And we've got just a few more minutes, Representative Washburn. We'll be with you in a minute. Okay. If we could just limit to about 3 minutes.
I will be very brief, Madam Chair. I just need to clarify something that was said yesterday, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. My name's Amy Hughes. I'm from Savannah. I'm with Hughes Public Affairs, and I'm here today as a volunteer representing citizen advocacy. Specifically, I served as an advocate in Savannah for a man named Bracky Hall ever since the 1990s until he passed away in 2018. And then I was the former board chair of citizen advocacy for Savannah. I sincerely appreciate the kind comments that Representative Gilliard had given about this particular organization. As you see, he's got a letter right there for you that is signed by the members of the coastal delegation talking about how important this program is to our community. And then I also appreciate the kind words that Representative Petrie said to you yesterday, because his mother had served as a previously as an advocate, and so he knows how important this program is. But I did want to clarify something that he said. So what is citizen advocacy? Briefly, it's an organization that takes a business person like you and me and matches you up with a person with a developmental disability, and then you serve as that person's advocate, their personal advocate, and you help make sure that they live a life of dignity and inclusion and part of the community. And you look at this person's life and you say, is this good enough? How can we help this person get an independent living waiver? How can we get this person out of this nursing home and back into society. And you just really develop a personal relationship that can be a lifelong relationship. And some of these relationships have gone on for over 40 years. Specifically, I wanted to point out, this is a statewide program. I know that Representative Petrie spoke about it as if it was just a Savannah program, but there's 4 offices: Macon, Savannah, Fulton, DeKalb, and then Athens, and they serve as sort of the regional hubs. And also, they're at the places where the tertiary hospitals are. One of the things that you see is sometimes a person with a developmental disability might have lived, like my person did, with their family their whole life, and then their family member gets sick or dies, and there's not a plan, and there's not other folks that step up. So this person might get sent to a nursing home, and then, or they might get sent into a hospital, and then the hospital says, okay, you can't stay here. We're going to send you to a nursing home. And they, for instance, for Brackey, where I met him, Brackey Hall, was down in Brunswick. They'd sent him down to Brunswick, a Savannah man who was a middle-aged person who had no business living in a nursing home. So anyway, so that I wanted to clarify. It is a state program. The budget recommendations were total elimination of all of the funding for all of the programs in Georgia. It was $56,000 in the FY20, and it was $224,000 in the FY21. It also had some faulty language in there. It said it duplicated the Disability Services Ombudsman program. It's just not true. This is, they do wonderful work, but they're a watchdog for agencies and organizations. Citizen advocacy is more about those personal relationships. The program's been funded since 1977. And it's been in DCA ever since. Now, you might be wondering, why in the world are we here in this budget? Well, that's just the way it's gone through the years. And so as one of the discussions that I've had with Madam Chair is, let's find a place. It might not necessarily need to be in DCA anymore because it doesn't necessarily match with what they do. But what I will say to you is that this is a little bit of money that does so much good. I'd love to share some personal stories with you about other relationships around the state, because it's really amazing how this impacts people at a person-to-person level and builds community. Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can get you any information, please let me know.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do. And I'm sorry we're in such a hurry, but we've got people standing in line. And if anybody would like to have her any questions, I have her contact information. And if you have any questions, we'll get back with you. Thank you.